have a feeling it's probably that, but let's all pretend that one day we're going to have this big breakthrough and find our unique style.
Love. Miss Independent, I be loving how you winning. I just wanna go catch your vibe. Ay, wanna see you in the daytime and not when it only get dark outside.
Hi guys. Today I have this very big pile. This is from one bag. I have 2 big bags of raw cotton from a friend's cotton farm that he gifted me. And today I'm going to be basically just preparing it for spinning. They have all the seeds in it and lots of leaves and things inside it that I need to pick out. I asked you guys on Instagram to send me some questions that I can answer while I prepare this. So let's just get into the first question. How did you get into knitting or crochet? I first learned how to knit when I was 7 from my mum, and then never stuck with it because I was just making scarves, the classic beginner point, and I got bored and just kind of stopped. And so I've tried to start knitting like throughout my life multiple times, but turns out you need to go straight into sweaters if you want to actually keep knitting in your life. Wow, once you get all of the dirt out, it looks so clean and beautiful. I'm putting my finished cotton in this little jar. So yes, I started crocheting on a whim, like most things I start doing, and I really didn't think it was going to last very long, but I got like really obsessed with it because I started making actual pieces straight away instead of just trying to make a scarf to practice the technique. I found that in hindsight, like if you're learning anything really, any sort of like creative medium, I think it was really important for me to like go straight into making something that I could possibly wear at the end, and like not do it perfectly, but at least I'd get something out of it and achieve something instead of just like practicing the techniques for a while and then making something. I started my business, Dordy, and it was all crochet, and then I just got this like need to learn knitting just to like I wanted to like expand what techniques I knew so I could like be as versatile as possible. And so then I picked up knitting properly, and then I haven't really crocheted since then. I just got really obsessed with knitting. I found the flow to be way more easy to connect with, and just like overall more enjoyable, and I just preferred the look of the fabric itself. Is there anything I hate to make? Like, hate is a pretty strong word. I don't hate making anything, but it's definitely things that I like wouldn't make that often. I mean, honestly, crochet hats. I don't really enjoy making crochet hats anymore. I started with them and I made a lot, and I just find them so boring to make and just a little bit over them really, but I don't hate them. Hate is definitely too strong for what I feel about it. I just prefer making other things. Let's get into the freehanding portion. How do you come up with so many ideas for your freehand projects? I think it is kind of a mindset thing, like approaching every project with like a let's see what happens approach. I don't really design pieces per se before I start knitting or crocheting. I really just kind of go like, I know I want to make a sweater, or I know I want to make leg warmers, and then I kind of just begin and then see where I start going with it. As of late, I have started like designing things in my head a bit beforehand, just like in terms of construction of like, I know with leg warmers, once I started doing them more, I started seeing the end product a bit easier than when I started leg warmers and I didn't really know how it was going to go. So I started like kind of seeing it beforehand because I was like wanting to try new things. Yeah, I think it is just like willingness to approach things with I'm not sure what's going to happen kind of attitude. Oh, and also willing to take risks, like creative risks with your pieces. That always kind of allows me to go outside of my usual areas and come up with new ideas. I don't know if you can see that from here. It's so fluffy. It's not taking as long as I thought. Now I'm looking at this, so I'm like, that's a lot. Can you freehand anything? Yes. The only restrictions around freehand are the ones that you kind of create in your head. There's situations like a raglan. It's really like, it is what it is. You know, there's basic construction shapes and techniques in like clothes making, but the place that freehand comes in with those situations is, let's take the raglan sweater as an example. I'm like pretty loose with the calculations at the beginning. You know, I split up the stitches correctly and make sure it's even, but that's like really all I do. I'm not thinking ahead measurement wise. It's just like, okay, that's split up and that looks like it will be, you know, far away from each other for a sleeve, so I'm just going to go with that. It hasn't failed me yet. I haven't like finished a raglan like beginning section and been like, I misjudged the maths at the start. Because I know that you can get pretty deep and pretty like particular with doing all the calculations at the beginning. But yeah, you can literally freehand anything. Freehanding is just like doing something without a pattern. And so if you don't have a pattern in front of you and you're not following steps, it's freehand. I wonder if people have this like impression that freehand is making crazy, like, what do they call, like subversive styles? It's not necessarily that. It's not always like breaking the complete rules of garment construction. Sometimes it's just as simple as you're knitting without a pattern. Was it a lot of trial and error when freehanding items? Always. Like, this is a part of freehanding that will never go away. There's a lot of frogging in freehanding. There's a lot of like mistakes. This, you know, you make decisions and it's a bit of a risk and sometimes it doesn't work out. And so you have to like undo sections sometimes, pretty often. That can be frustrating. But if you embrace it as much as possible, it's not frustrating. And like the longer I've been doing it, the more I've found myself, like if I've had to undo hours of work, I don't actually feel as bad as I think I'm going to feel about it. I'm just like, okay. And you just kind of restart, because in the end it's like, it's more worth getting a piece that you really love rather than just stick with something that isn't really working well just because you've put hours of time into it. So it's really, it's about problem solving and getting to the end of that piece, not really about the actual final product, for me anyway. It's like whenever I finish a knit, I'm like, okay, cool. It's the problem solving and the construction and the challenge of actually like figuring out my way through it that is like really what attracts me so much to making clothes in general. This one's a really good one and a conversation that I really love, and it is finding your unique style. I think this is like, it's something that when you start making clothes, especially as a freehander or a pattern designer, if that's your cup of tea, one of the big learning curves and like hills to climb over is finding a style and finding kind of like your language, your visual language around your pieces. Because at the start, obviously, when you learn a new skill, you're mainly going off like imitation and interpretation of other people's kinds of the things that you're seeing. Otherwise, how are you going to know how to do anything? I think there's two elements to finding your unique style. One is kind of out of your control, and it comes when it comes, if it comes. You can't force it to come any quicker, and you can't make it happen. But the second element can be a little bit more intentional, of actually exploring and trying to find your own style and your own voice within an art form, and I think it comes with exercises, and I kind of break them up like this. You've got repetition, so literally the act of doing things over and over and over again until you understand it so deeply that you start developing on the thing itself. The second one is kind of controlling your consumption. So if you're about to start creating a new piece, not going on Pinterest beforehand, not going on Instagram beforehand and looking at your favorite makers, but really letting yourself sit with your own brain and your own ideas and your own inspiration, and just making sure that you're not consuming too much while you're creating, and just finding this balance between consumption and creation, and making sure that the two aren't merging together too often. That kind of leads to, where are you sourcing your inspiration? So I haven't really done this in a while because I've been kind of occupied with learning other things at the moment, but I have a series going on my YouTube called the Freehand Diaries, and in that series I prompt myself with something that is not to do with fiber art, so literally anything from the world. Artwork, words, a feeling, a color, a texture, nature, literally anything. And then choosing a prompt and then making a piece based off that. So that's like the starting point. And then coming up with ideas and color palettes and construction, shape and stitches and whatever that has been prompted in my subconscious by the topic I've given myself. And that's more of one of like an exercise kind of thing that can help push yourself into spaces that are building on ideas and coming up with unique ideas. And the more you do it, the sooner you'll find your unique style, I guess. I think it's like they go, all of those things together, and then with the first element of it just taking a lot of time. Like I feel like I'm still working towards that. I don't think I have a unique style as such yet, but I'm feeling way more connected to my practice, and I think it just takes a lot of time. Maybe it takes forever. Maybe you never reach that. I have a feeling it's probably that, but let's all pretend that one day we're going to have this big breakthrough and find our unique style. How do you source your yarn? This is something that I want to do a longer deep dive video into, my whole journey with fiber and materials and the very unexpected shift towards natural fibers and animal fibers, which I'm a vegan, and that was really confusing for me morally, because I'm like, I love the planet and I love animals, and when I started fiber arts I was very like honestly kind of against using animal fibers because I was like, they're just inherently bad, and I think it's more nuanced than that, and I don't think it's fully the case. But in terms of sourcing my yarn, when I started crocheting and knitting, I really got my yarn just from like the local craft store, like the chain craft store. I'm in Australia, Spotlight. If you're in another country, I think you've got like Michael's, or I hear about Michael's all the time. That might be the equivalent. And then the more I started researching about, the ethics and sustainability, this is a very nuanced and deep conversation that I'm not going to have the whole conversation here. But the more I started researching about basically like how can you track the life of the yarn that you're getting, I was like, do I feel completely comfortable personally? This is fine for other people, but do I personally feel comfortable like buying yarn that I don't really know where it's from, and also it's made in like mass amounts and in factories? And since I started spinning, it's like it's getting really hard for me to justify like going to a craft store and buying something for like $10, and I don't know where it's made or how it's made, who it's made by, what the animals went through to get it. Kind of through my research and like getting a bit deeper into this side of being a fiber artist, I've started first going to more like independent, small businesses that are local. I spin my own yarn. Apparently now I'm preparing the raw fiber from the very beginning, but also, searching online and looking for yarn makers and producers that hand spin, or at least you can track where they're sourcing the fiber from. It's a very lengthy and like intense can of worms, and I'm really not even like most of the way through it yet, and so I'm still very much at the start of that journey, but I'm really just trying to figure out how to actually like buy my yarn and source my yarn as ethically as possible so I'm not hurting anybody. I'm also not rich, and when I'm in a pickle and I really need materials so I can do my art form, I will still just go to Spotlight because I need it sometimes and also can't afford to spend like $40, sometimes $50 on a skein of yarn. Trying to have some balance there as well, not completely like fucking myself up by spending heaps of money on yarn, but also not just always buying yarn that I'm like, where is this from? Do you make enough money to live on from your art and music? That's a funny joke. Nope. I'd really love to one day. That's what I'm working towards, but right now I am a part-time nanny and I do this. But no, I do not make a full wage or income off this. This is no. Let's get into the spinning portion because it's become a very big part of my life recently. How to get started with hand spinning. Would highly recommend starting with a drop spindle. I'm really wanting to look into a spinning wheel next, but now that I've been doing spinning from a drop spindle for a while, I think it's really, really valuable to know how to spin completely, really, like with your hands, so that you can understand how it works and how the actual like mechanism of spinning yarn works, so that when you go to a spinning wheel, the transition is a little bit smoother. The steps you can take with learning spinning on a drop spindle, you can do the park and draft method, and then you can work your way up to continuous spinning where it's just dangling down and spinning in the air, and you're just like a spinning wheel, you're using two hands instead of putting it in between your legs. And then once I learned how to continuous spin, it kind of clicked in my brain of how a spinning wheel might feel. And obviously it would still be different, but yeah, I would really recommend starting with a drop spindle. I bought one online and it didn't come for ages. Well, I can't stand waiting for packages to arrive. It was coming in a week, but that was too long, and me and my boyfriend made a drop spindle. And if you'd like a video on how to make a drop spindle, let me know and I'll make one, because if you can make your own, as a beginner, I would really, really recommend doing that because it's way less expensive, and I literally prefer the drop spindle that I made over the one that I bought. The one I bought is like too heavy. I'm really interested in spinning like thin yarn, and my drop spindle, because I just made it myself and it's not really that weighted, it's really light and so it spins way faster and way longer, which is what you need for spinning fine yarn. If you want to make like big bulky art yarn, a heavier spindle will be great. If you can make your own, I would really recommend doing that. We're making stuff with our hands all the time with what we do, so it was just like another level of, oh, I want a drop spindle, I'll build it myself. In terms of fiber, from my research, I have always heard people recommend to start learning to spin on fibers, if you're using like wool fiber, to start learning on Corriedale wool and Shetland wool, because they're often like just like stickier and tougher than something like merino or silk, because when you're drafting they're very, very soft, the merinos and silk and stuff, and so they break easier they're much easier to draft from, but they do really like pull apart, and when you're learning that can be quite frustrating. The first skeins I ever spun were from roving, and I think that is best for beginners because it's really long and you can pre-draft them and they're just like way more sturdy. Now that I've spun from a few like bats and stuff, I don't really like roving as much, but when you're learning it is it is more sturdy. Yeah, and then the third piece of advice I have for learning how to hand spin is to just have so much patience for it. It's definitely a steep learning curve and you're not going to get perfect yarn straight away. Allow your first few skeins that you make to be shit. If there's ever a place where you will learn from mistakes, it's from spinning. Like the first skein I made was like I had to go around this whole thing to make it like usable because I span it way too tight, and I wouldn't have known what a too tightly spun single looked like if I didn't have to do that. So you just got to take your losses like a champ when it comes to spinning, but it is really, really worth it, and the feeling you get from having yarn to knit with that you've made is just like honestly unmatched. I would also love to make a deep dive into how to start spinning, so let me know if you like that video because I'm obsessed with spinning right now. I just can't get enough of it. Someone asked, can you spin any fiber of yarn? Can I spin my acrylic scraps? You can spin any fiber, like any fiber that you've used in knitting and that you've seen be used, you can spin that. I don't know where you would get like acrylic fiber, but in terms of scrap yarn, you definitely can. You just need some hand carders. If hand carders are too expensive, which they can very much be, I started out just getting 2 dog brushes. They work perfectly for carding. So you would just want to get your acrylic scraps and card them up. I've found that spinning straight from scraps is kind of difficult sometimes because they don't obviously blend as nicely as like raw fiber, but they do the job. And I've also heard if you have a blending board, a good way to use your scraps and incorporate them into your spinning is by kind of blending them with other prepared spinning fiber and then blending the scraps into it for textural things. I haven't really done that yet, but you can definitely spin from anything. Okay, those are all the questions I'm going to get through today. I hope you enjoyed this. I haven't done a video like this before, but since I had this work to do, it's like this will be a really nice time to just chat and sort through my fiber. This is all I got done. It's pretty good. That's not bad. This is going to take me a long time, but I'm really excited by it. It's really nice to be like, really working through the fiber that I'm going to spin from the very beginning. It's very exciting. If you have any thoughts on any of the topics I went through today, drop them in the comments and we can have a little conversation. You can follow my Instagram, you can shop my pieces on my website dordystudio.com. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a lovely week of spinning and knitting or crocheting or whatever it is you do. Bye bye.